Very warm welcome everyone to the Maritime Education Podcast. My name is Barry Sadler and welcome back to our regulars, and if you're new to our podcast, welcome on board. I hope you find the information and discussions that we have both enjoyable and informative. Today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about VTS, Vessel Traffic Services, and open up perhaps the confusion that there is between the different types of VTS that are available around the coast of the UK, how they operate, and what empowers them to do what they are allowed to do. VTS stands for Vessel Traffic Services, and they form a critical part of the United Kingdom's maritime safety and efficiency network by assisting with the traffic and movements in some of the world's busiest and most constrained waters. United Kingdom VTS centres include places like Southampton, Liverpool, Felixstowe and Harwich, the Port of London, to name but a few. And a VTS service in itself can either be active or it can be passive. We'll get into that a little bit later on. VTS is normally provided by the port or an organisation appointed by the port to manage the traffic. Where we have a VTS service that is overlooking a much larger area, which may include within it several harbour authorities, but is mainly driven by the provision of information to shipping using that area, we call this a VTIS, a Vessel Traffic Information Service, which differs very, very much from VTS, be it active or be it passive. So, first of all, let's talk about the differences there that we get between VTIS and VTS. Now, VTS, the Vessel Traffic Service, is of course a shore-based establishment that has been put in place by a competent authority to help improve safety of vessel traffic and of course protect the marine environment. Now, VTS can be either active or it can be passive. An active VTS has the force of the harbour master behind it, and an active VTS can give instructions to ships and use the powers under the 1964 Harbours Act to be able to control the timing and manner in which shipping approaches. A passive VTS is still a vessel traffic service that has been put in place by a competent authority, but they do not use the powers of the harbour master to direct vessels. The information that's given out on a VTIS service is there to assist with safety, but no real control of traffic is exercised from any legal standpoint. So, at the end of the day, a VTS that is passive will still be part of the port authority, but will not pass on direct instructions to ships with any legal force behind it at all. Flip now to a VTIS, a Vessel Traffic Information Service. This is a much lighter, shall we say, more informal, information-focused version of VTS. And it provides information only, such as traffic broadcasts, weather, navigational warnings, and things like this. But it does not organise traffic or issue any binding directions which are given the force of law. VTIS, although it's not part of a port, is recognised by IALA, but is often used in areas that are much larger than harbour areas, or areas that contain multiple harbours. Each will have its own VTS. A VTIS will monitor traffic to ensure that it is behaving itself. It will give traffic information broadcasts on vessels that are transiting the area which other vessels may need to be aware of. It may broadcast navigational warnings to vessels in the area to ensure that they're aware of things like navigation marks and other things that may have wandered or changes to depths that may not have been promulgated through the chart correction process yet. VTIS is a bit like VTS Lite, an information and monitoring service without control powers. VTS itself, let's focus on that for the time being. It is mandated in the United Kingdom under the Port Marine Safety Code and is operated in accordance with IMO resolutions and IALA. IALA, of course, being the International Association of Marine Aids to Navigation and Lighthouse Authorities, under the guidelines of IALA and IMO resolution Alpha 1158. This means that the principle of VTS has international recognition, and the establishment of it is normally controlled by the national legislation of the country containing the VTS. So in the United Kingdom, that legislation is a combination really of the Harbours Act 1964 and the UK Ports Act 1991. Now, the significance of these two acts is that they provide statutory powers to harbour authorities to regulate the manner and timing of arrival of traffic. Those acts also allow the harbour masters within those harbours to issue directions, either general directions, which are directions given to all classes of vessels, such as speed limits, or special directions, which are aimed squarely at a single ship or a single master. And these two acts empower the harbour master of a statutory harbour authority and allow him or her to give such direction to traffic. That power of the harbour master is then delegated to the traffic management service, making it an active vessel traffic service system. So that's an active system which is capable of giving an instruction to the ship, and the ship is expected to comply with that instruction. Now, when it comes to instructions which may cause harm in some way, then we need to rely on the master's discretion in order to challenge that instruction. So, for instance, if an instruction is given for a ship to enter a channel, yet the wind is so strong that entering the channel would be dangerous, then the master may, of course, under SOLAS Chapter 5, Regulation 34, use his or her discretion to keep the ship safe and not comply with the instruction given by the harbour master through the vessel traffic services system that is in place. So it is important to recognise that although the law enables an active VTS to give such instructions, the master's discretion always prevails with regards to the direct safety of the ship itself. The Port Marine Safety Code, which is a non-mandatory code in the United Kingdom, requires harbour authorities to conduct risk assessments and establish a VTS where necessary. VTSs are a result of a risk assessment of the topography of the harbour, the amount of traffic that uses the harbour, the amount of leisure and small vessels that may be involved within the harbour, and the types of activity that happen within the harbour area. Once this risk assessment has been done, if the harbour authority consider the risks high enough, then they are required under the Port Marine Safety Code to establish a VTS to control the traffic. VTS operators are very, very skilled personnel who are trained and certified to IALA V103 standards. Now, these are exceptionally high standards that are applied to the training and examination of VTS operators. A VTS operator, having had this training, will be able to exercise the delegated powers of the harbour master to be able to give directions to ships with regards to specifically the timing of their arrival, and if necessary, when that ship is in the statutory harbour area, give that ship a special direction. Now, the powers of VTS operators that are delegated to them by the harbour master may start when the ship is way out at sea, as it enters the 12-mile zone off the coast of the United Kingdom. It comes into the territorial waters, and that makes that ship subject to UK law. Where a harbour has been established with a VTS, that means that ship must comply. So as long as the ship's within the 12-mile territorial sea, then the VTS can start to give directions to that ship, controlling the manner and timing at which it approaches the port. In other words, if a big ship is coming to the port, leaving it too late to tell that ship that it's not due to berth until tomorrow or the day after, means that the ship may have to abort at a very, very dangerous time. And so the powers that are given to a VTS operating under the Harbours Act 64 or the Port Act 91 must extend to a distance that is safe, so that we're able to give plenty of notice to approaching vessels so that they can safely abort if necessary, or adjust their speed if necessary to arrive at the time given to them by VTS. VTS does have MCA oversight, and the Maritime and Coastguard Agency will audit UK VTS authorities to ensure that they are fully complying with both the Port Marine Safety Code, and they are exercising their powers granted to them by the various harbour acts in a way that helps and assists safety, and those powers are not being used in such a way that gains commercial advantage over the safe movement of ships. The main role of an active VTS is one of safety, and the traffic coming through an active VTS area will be closely monitored by these trained operators to prevent collisions, groundings, to prevent congestion in narrow waterways, as well as passing on directions from the accompanying harbour master. Obviously, the efficiency of the port is something else that VTS will help to optimise, with allowing ships to enter through berthing windows, controlling pilotage operations. So the pilot operations staff that put me on ships are in exactly the same operations room in Southampton as the VTS staff themselves. So there's a very, very close coordination there. If the VTS staff can see that a ship is arriving, they can warn the pilot desk to say, is there a pilot due on that ship? When do you expect to be able to board that ship? And if the ship is too early, then VTS can intervene at a safe time and ask the vessel to either anchor or wait for the pilot at a specific time. Obviously, environmental protection is a big benefit of an active VTS, and in controlling the traffic through their area, they reduce the risk of spills and incidents, particularly in sensitive marine areas. So Southampton water is an area of special scientific interest, and so the control of traffic in Southampton water is vitally important, so that we don't end up with congestion or end up bringing ships in such a manner that they have an incident in Southampton water with the resultant environmental risk that comes with it. VTS contribute massively towards the security of the port, so they can monitor traffic for unlawful or unsafe activities. They can establish security levels with ships coming to and from the port, and ensure that ships approaching the port are there for a lawful reason. The right of innocent passage is a right given under UNCLOS for any ship to pass through the territorial waters of a coastal state in peace, as long as it's not there to wage war or to commit a crime or pollute the marine environment. And so, to facilitate this innocent passage, VTS are able to monitor vessels to ensure that's exactly what they're doing, conducting an innocent passage to and from the port. The moment that a ship starts to enter the port with an intention other than peaceful trade, that's when VTS can move in and start to give directions to that vessel to instruct it not to enter the port, or to enter the port through a specific route, or indeed to take a pilot if they haven't taken that into account and missed that at their passage planning stage. Support to captains is vital, and VTS will give important navigation information to the captains of approaching ships to help them navigate in complex waters before they take their pilot. They can provide navigational information regarding the navigational aids, the wind and tidal conditions, movement of other ships in the area, any special dangers that may be present on the day that the ship is approaching, so that the masters of ships, particularly those that may not be familiar with the port area, are kept abreast of those navigational items that can affect the ship. Now, VTS doesn't stand still, and active VTS in the UK is evolving all the time, with advances in things such as digital ship reporting, with IMOE navigation initiatives, and built-in layers on electronic charts to see traffic, AIS and radar integration for greater situational awareness, and that's something that Southampton has already and has done for many years, integrating the AIS signals of approaching vessels with the radar targets on the radars of vessel traffic operatives to ensure the identification of vessels is accurate and safe. AI has started to creep in and predict traffic movements to try and facilitate just-in-time arrivals. This is in a very, very early stage, and just-in-time arrivals are designed to allow the ship to have minimum downtime as it approaches the port, and therefore set its speed accordingly to arrive at the port just before it's required. That way the ship isn't late and trying to play catch up, and that way the ship doesn't burn too much fuel only to arrive at the port to find the berth isn't ready. So AI is being used to help with these just-in-time arrivals. There are a lot of factors that go into a just-in-time arrival, and as I say, this AI intervention of the timing of a ship at the port has a long way to go, as the variables that are set within the data to get this AI to operate efficiently are hugely variable. Lots of factors: berth availability, cargo movement, other traffic, weather, tides, tidal windows, underkill clearances, all contribute towards the massive amount of variables that are used to have a ship arrive at the optimum time in the port to minimise its downtime. A ship that thrashes its engines all the way to a port only to find that the port doesn't want it in because the berth is full will have a very high carbon index indicator, and the more they can save on passage by only doing the speed required to get them there just in time means not just a reduction in costs for the ship owner due to reduction in fuel costs, but a reduction of that carbon index indicator. In other words, a reduction of the indicator that shows how much fuel has been burnt over a specific distance travelled. Ships that burn too much fuel are graded much lower than those that have more efficient engines and burn just right amount of fuel to get them to the next port in time for them to undertake their operations. Remote VTS operations are being conducted in many places around the world. Southampton being the very, very busy port that it is, the VTS there is not remote. It is very, very much on site in a purposefully designed space within the ABP Southampton headquarters, and that space brings everybody together that is involved in the management of ships: the assistant harbour master, VTS operators, pilot desk operatives. They bring them all together in one place to ensure that the flow of information amongst everybody is at its most efficient, and ships can therefore be controlled not just safely but efficiently. At the end of the day, an active VTS operating under the powers delegated by the harbour master are a cornerstone of UK maritime safety, and they ensure that some of the busiest shipping lanes, busiest ports and busiest stretches of water remain safe, efficient and environmentally protected. They combine very high levels of technology with good operator knowledge, defined marine vocabularies and defined principles of instruction from marine operatives to ensure that ships can come and go through these busy areas as safe as possible. The UK's VTS network continues to provide world-leading examples of proactive traffic management in these complex waterways to assist with the safe movement of some of the biggest ships in the world. It is important to recognise with an active VTS, so that operates with the power to directly control traffic, it is important to recognise that the right to do this comes from both an international and national level. Now, IMO's Convention on the Safety of Life at Sea, SOLAS Chapter 5, Regulation 12 provides the international framework for establishing vessel traffic services, and it states quite clearly that governments may establish VTS where necessary for safety, efficiency or environmental protection. Participation in VTS is mandatory when it's declared compulsory by the coastal state. So the United Kingdom's Harbours Act 1964 sets out those harbours that have the power to make their instructions mandatory and sets out the local legislation to achieve this. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea gives coastal states the right to adopt laws and regulations for safe navigation. So at a United Nations level, those regulations are allowed. And of course, it sets the territorial sea limit in UNCLOS of 12 nautical miles, allowing those regulations to be imposed upon foreign visiting vessels at that stage. Now, within the United Kingdom itself, as we have discussed, we have the Harbours Act 1964, which grants harbour authorities statutory powers to regulate vessel movements, and includes issuing these directions for safe and efficient traffic flow. A lot of merchant shipping within the United Kingdom is empowered by the Merchant Shipping Act of 1995, which gives the Secretary of State, via their agency, the Maritime and Coastguard Agency, the right to regulate navigation and safety, including VTS oversight, and gives the MCA enforcement powers in this respect. So a ship that doesn't comply with the instructions given to it by VTS will expect a visit from the MCA, and if non-compliance is established, then because that ship is now not in compliance with minimum international standards that have been adopted in SOLAS, the powers of detention are there for the MCA to detain that ship, stop it from sailing, because it would be considered a danger to those on board if it did not comply with the requirements of VTS. And as I said earlier, the other national basis on which VTS is established is the Port Marine Safety Code, which, although it's not statutory, is binding under health and safety law. In other words, it's binding because a harbour authority has a legal duty to conduct a risk assessment and establishes a duty of care for ports to manage traffic safely. The requirement for a port to be safe is a legal requirement, and the Port Marine Safety Code assists in the legal requirement being met by both the harbour master and the port. So although the Port Marine Safety Code remains a current non-statutory document, if it is ignored, then it can be said that the laws that require duty of care for the port to manage traffic safely are ignored at the same time. A lot of the powers established to a harbour master are local authority powers. So although we have the national legislation of the Harbours Act 1964, each individual harbour will need to apply for its own powers of directions and establish bylaws so that they can implement all the necessary powers that are delegated to a harbour master under that Harbours Act 1964. So the Secretary of State still defines which harbours have that power, but it is important to recognise that when it comes down to the enforcement of that power, it will be a local bylaw and direction that requires ships to comply with the instructions given to them by an active VTS. We've mainly talked about active VTSs there, but passive VTS is a VTS established by a harbour authority for reasons of safety, but it does not give any directions with any kind of statutory or legal backing. So again, it's mainly an information service, but nonetheless an information service that has been established by the harbour authority to help the safety of shipping within that harbour. I hope you found this quick overview of VTS interesting and informative. It is, as a pilot, a very, very important part of my job that I interact in a timely and effective manner with Southampton VTS to ensure that what I'm doing with the ship that is under my conduct falls in line with the plans and directions that VTS have made on the ship. VTS will often tell me that I have to be at a specific place at a specific time, either to meet tugs or to meet another outbound ship in a specifically designated passing area, and that instruction to me is one that I have to comply with. If I don't comply with it and there's an incident, then myself and the master may be found guilty of offences under the Merchant Shipping Act. So VTS, very, very important part of my job. The information that we get from Southampton VTS is very, very detailed. It is incredibly important that we make note of it as pilots, and important that we act on the information given to us, because it's given to us in a manner and for a reason that is a safety one. It's not given to us for any other reason. VTS are there to manage the safety and efficiency of ships, and their information that is provided must be taken on board by both the pilot and the master when conducting their passage in and out of an area. So there you are. Hopefully I have taken away the doubt as to what a VTS is, be it active or passive, and the difference between a VTS and a VTIS. One thing I didn't do was give an example of a VTIS, and Dover Coastguard is probably one of the most well-known examples of a VTIS, Although one thing to remember about Dover Coastguard is that they do operate an IMO recognised traffic information service and reporting scheme, which masters of vessels on an international basis are expected to participate in. So although they're a VTIS with no powers of direction, there is an international standard that requires captains to comply with the mandatory reporting that comes with Dover Coastguard's VTIS. Thank you everybody for listening to this podcast. I look forward to welcoming you back to the next one. In the meantime, have a great day everybody. Thank you very much.